Well, Jurassic World Rebirth is out, and people have opinions as usual. And if you care about mine, stick around. If not, I don't know what you're doing here. That's just what a review is. For the record, this review will start out completely spoiler-free, and then later we'll get into my disjointed, spoilery thoughts. I'll let you know when that happens, though. So, Jurassic World Rebirth, the follow-up to Dominion, one of the biggest catastrophic cinematic disasters in recent memory. Now, I've been doing my due diligence as a Jurassic insider and tracking the production of Rebirth basically since its inception. And my excitement for this movie has waned and risen time and time again, within the past year or so, that is. Some news was really captivating and gave me hope, like David Koepp returning after 29 years to direct a Jurassic film, as well as getting Gareth Edwards signed on to direct the project. I was cautiously optimistic, just like a lot of people. The first trailer looked fine, but pretty generic all things considered. But I think the second trailer really solidified that this movie was going for more of the horror, or at least thriller aspects of the original. And even though I wasn't expecting much considering how disappointed I was by Dominion, there was a little light in the corner of my brain that gave me the slightest bit of optimism that this movie would be a home run and be the best Jurassic sequel we've ever gotten. I mean, it wasn't like it was a particularly high bar to clear. So, I watched the movie, trying to hide that mindset so I wouldn't get disappointed. Yeah, I got disappointed. I was borderline pissed off watching Jurassic World Rebirth. Don't get me wrong, this isn't the worst Jurassic movie out there. It's certainly better than the last two movies. But I don't know, getting the bubonic plague is also better than watching the last two movies. And as crazy as it is to say, considering my expectations were on the floor for this movie, I kind of feel disappointed in a way. It really got me to reflect on what this franchise has become and what the the executives at Universal are doing, and how this movie, despite bringing in so much talent, still managed to be this mediocre. It's genuinely kind of impressive. Just like most of these movies, there were enough things that I liked. This wasn't a completely unworthwhile, unwatchable experience that robbed me of all my happiness or anything. Honestly, there isn't even really anything horrible about it either, at least on the surface. So here is my brief list of everything I liked in Rebirth. The CGI is good. Wow, the visuals of a $180 million movie are pretty great, who would have thought? Some of the shots with the Titanosaur look kinda iffy, but overall I wasn't really distracted by an overabundance of CG. Unlike the last two movies, there really aren't a lot of group pictures, quote unquote, where we've got a million different dinosaur species in one location. Most of the scenes are just a few creatures and that's it, so it wasn't really a big deal. But not a whole lot was done practically like the last two, probably because the production was rushed. Who would have thought that's what happens? I also think that most of the dino sequences in the first half of Rebirth are actually pretty solid. I don't really have a lot to complain about. I think each sequence is just a little bit worse than the last. The mosasaur attack when the full crew is on the boat is pretty freaking cool, I have to admit. I've got no reservations about that. It's as cool as it looks in the trailer. I do wish the Spinosaurus did a little bit more in this extended scene. In fact, I wish that they did more with the Spinosaurus throughout the entire movie, but oh well. But yeah, otherwise I think it's pretty good, and I think Edwards really captures the scale and magnitude of the mosasaur. She's pretty sick. In fact, that's consistent with most of the movie. Gareth Edwards is one of the best directors working today when it comes to visual presentation. He has a real sense for grandeur, and I think for brief moments when the script allows him to, he manages to capture an iota of the majesty that went into the original Jurassic Park, at least when it comes to making the dinosaurs look majestic and also terrifying. Then there's the finally captured in film River Raft T-Rex escape sequence, and I gotta tell you, I've been waiting years for this to happen, and I think Edwards delivers. It's pretty intense, and even though you know no one in the scene is gonna die, neither does anybody in the original sequence in the novel. It manages to be intense without the threat of death, something the rest of this movie suffers from. The sequence is just very well done, everything I wanted from it, and I don't really have a lot to complain about either. Maybe it took a little bit too long for that girl, don't ask me her name, you know I don't know, to drag the raft into the river, but otherwise no notes. Then there's the Titanosaur scene, and this is what I meant by Edwards capturing a fleeting moment of the magic of the original. We've had these sauropod awe scenes basically from the beginning, but I'd say this is by far the best one outside of the original, obviously. I don't know, man. I think it was just really good. It might just be hearing the iconic score and the loud theater speakers. Actually, that was definitely what it was, but this scene kind of had me misty-eyed. Yeah, but other than the green screen on the Titanosauruses themselves looking a little iffy, the sequence itself doesn't overstay its welcome. A little superficial, yes, but I'll take it over most of the scenes of humans talking in this movie. What's next? The Quetzalcoatlus? Yeah, it's fine. Quetzal looks fine. Kind of pokes around at Zora and Henry a little. That's about it, to be honest. There's a few more dinosaur scenes, obviously, but most of them are in the back half and contain somewhat spoilery content. So we'll save it for later in the video. What else did I like? Does the score count? It's kind of just a greatest hits melody from the other movies, but there's a few original pieces by Alexander Desplat that are pretty sick. The art direction is nice. The island looks like a better version of Isla Sorna, even though the last time that island showed up was 20 years ago, so obviously this is gonna look a lot nicer. But while I think the photorealistic landscapes are nice, we don't learn a lot about the island itself. It just screams, this is the setting of the new Jurassic movie without having much significance. Other things I liked, a few named characters actually die. Gasp, I know it's crazy. I mean, it's improvement over Dominion at least. Okay, I think that's all the good things I've got in me. Now for the shit I don't like. The start of this movie is boring as sin for the majority of the first act. We slowly introduce each one of our characters, but don't see dinosaurs for so long, and when we do, they're few and far between our riveting character expositions. Yippee. I don't hate any of these peeps, but they're certainly not as fleshed out as the movie thinks they are. Kep is certainly not a bad writer, he's had his hits, but it feels like he's working with nothing when it comes to the script. I swear, the script is so useless for the first act. Nothing that these characters say to each other is memorable, or at the very least, actually funny. Which this movie is absolutely not, by the way. I did not laugh watching Jurassic World Rebirth once. The last movie was chock full of annoyingly arrogant, sarcastic humor that littered the script with some of the most cringe character interactions I've seen in a movie.
Is that, like, really corny?
Oh, so corny.
This movie dials back on it a little bit, but I can't say in any new enlightening direction. And unfortunately, I have to say that some of that is due to the direction. Many people have gone on record saying that Gareth Edwards' weak point is his characters. They rarely feel like actual human beings and more like devices to move the plot along. Even his best movies suffer from weak character direction, and this one is no exception. I can see that he is trying, and so is a majority of the cast. There are attempts to make heartfelt moments, but a lot of times it just feels like, okay, so this is the part where we sit around and explain who we are, what we're going to learn by the end of this movie, and possibly foreshadow a cute character moment later in the film. That last one's completely optional. It doesn't happen much. Why are Zora and Duncan having this prolonged conversation about their past in the first place? They know each other, they're friends in this universe. I genuinely could not stop rolling my eyes multiple times throughout this extended conversation, and by extent the entire first act. There's some midway decent character stuff with Jonathan Bailey's character, Henry Loomis, and I feel like he definitely put on the best performance for Rebirth. I just generally connect to characters that are huge dinosaur fanboys, and he filled that role pretty adequately. He's no Alan Grant, but he was pretty decent, and I really liked his reaction to the Titanosaurus. That was pretty cool. Mahershala Ali as Duncan gets a few good character moments, but not enough to make him a lot more interesting than any of the first Jurassic World trilogy's protagonists. He has fleeting moments where he grieves the loss of his crew, but it never feels like this tread comes to a head. There's a point in the movie where he completely forgets about the deaths of his crewmates, which was really odd. I thought they were building up to a moment where he vents to Zora about it, but of course that didn't happen, because that takes actual effort. And Zora is the worst one of them all. What a complete and utter waste of ScarJo. She gets rations in this movie. I was genuinely waiting for the writers to give her something to do. She reveals that one of her friends died in one of her previous co-op missions, probably when she was taking down the SHIELD helicopter with Steve Rogers, but this never gets addressed later in the story, and I thought that was building up to a moment between her and Duncan, but it never does, which is so weird. Why did they set that up if that was never gonna happen? Of course, then we have the family that the team rescues. Oh boy. This was my biggest reservation with Rebirth, to be honest. I was really worried that these guys would be a big part of the story and clog up screen time, and guess what? It's even worse than I imagined. They're almost the main characters alongside the other three, arguably four other main characters that we have. So we basically have like 8 main characters, and as you can imagine, this makes for a completely incomprehensible viewing experience as I'm trying to figure out who the hell I'm supposed to give a about in this damn movie. The answer, definitely none of these mother truckers. The family dynamic sucks. It's so cliche yet boring at the same time, and I swear to God, I could not stand the boyfriend character in this. He's just insufferable and easily the most unfunny character in this movie, maybe even the whole damn franchise. Obviously, this is no fault of the actor, I'm sure he's great, but so many of his jokes just go on and on. If they were just quick jabs, they would actually have a chance of being funny, but there's so many quote-unquote funny moments that go on for 30 seconds at least. I just cannot bring myself to care about any of these 4 family members. How could I when they're literally the same as every other type of character character like this in these movies. I genuinely groaned every time we switched over to them. I just cannot handle this much cliche. My cliche sensors are overloading with clichéness. Overall, the cast is a mixed bag, but the parts I liked about these characters weren't enough to hook me the entire way through. You still have to make reservations knowing that one of the characters you like will make a dumb decision or just be a bland piece of bread for 30 minutes straight before they get anything to do that's mildly interesting. And having very few competent characters is a really big red flag when you're making a movie, go figure. The worst part of Rebirth for me though was just how it flows. I can't get into all of it in spoiler-free territory, but to summarize, this film is really haphazardly pasted together. At least that's the way it feels for me. There's individual great dinosaur sequences, but when you mash them together in between sometimes superficially entertaining dialogues and otherwise boring, inconsequential dialogue, it starts to feel stale. There isn't a lot terrible about this movie, but there isn't a lot that stuck out to me either, and I think that's really due to the pacing and flow of the film. Again, I'll touch on this again when we get into spoilers and even more in future videos, but so much of this movie fails as both a regular movie and a Jurassic film. There's multiple different subplots in the movie, but the way that they intertwine and especially how they converge leaves a lot to be desired. It makes the viewing experience really awkward and drowns out some of the best scenes, and I think if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I mean. But anyways, I think that's all I can talk about without getting into spoilers, so if you don't want to get spoiled, skip to this timestamp. I will say a lot of what's in the trailers is basically how this movie ends. It's very predictable, and nothing is going to subvert your expectations. So if you haven't seen the movie and don't really care, I don't think this is going to ruin your experience of the film. But if you absolutely don't want to get spoiled, then again, skip to the timestamp. You have been warned. For the spoiler section, I'm mostly going to air out my disjointed spoilery thoughts. Maybe you guys are interested, I'll make a more in-depth, informed analysis after a couple of viewings, but for now, these are the main things that I want to cover. I feel like the last act of this movie is more on par with the first act, but just a little bit less boring. The second act feels like where this movie really found its stride. We had a dino sequence after dino sequence for a little while there, but eventually, we got to the mutants. Now, I don't exactly know what the general consensus on the mutant species was after the movie was released. All I can tell you is that I could not give a damn about the Mutodons, and especially the D-Rex. Distorted Rex looking ass creature. The Mutodon chase sequence is fine, basically just a watered down version of Jurassic Park's Velociraptor sequence of the same breath, which, by the way, I'm very excited to see Velociraptor fanboys' reaction to them getting a minute of screen time in this movie. That's gonna be very fun. I did like whenever Krebs chained the briefcase with the blood samples in it to his arm, and then the Mutodon used that towards its advantage later in the movie. That was pretty fun. Speaking of this character, he just isn't great, just like the other ones. I was waiting until we got to spoiler-free territory to talk about him, but a lot about this character just feels way too predictable, and I found the subplot where he lies to the group about almost intentionally killing that teenage girl really contrived and unnecessary. I mean, he really just could have helped her. I'm sure this group would not care at all if you stopped her from calling emergency rescue. They probably would all side along with you because they also want money and don't want to be kicked off the island, dip. The funniest part to me is that he has the opportunity to leave the plot at one point, but then he just rummages his way back in the middle of the D-Day sequence. D-Day what? Then he just rummages his way back in the middle of the D-Rex sequence, and while I was in the theater, I genuinely turned to my friend and said, "Huh? Why are you here?" But yeah, obviously he gets eaten, blah blah blah. The only casualty of the D-Rex in the modern day because they already killed off the rest of the useless side characters earlier. The D-Rex itself is fine, I guess I'm glad it isn't in it too much, but for the most part this thing is just a really big dumb oaf that never once feels threatening outside the opening. The design also blows, I'm sorry. I mean, think about the Cam Cretaceous Scorpius Rex design if you've seen that. Look how much more captivating this looks in comparison. He does almost manage to kill Duncan, but not quite, because of course he doesn't. Obviously Duncan should have died here, even a toddler knows that this is just bad writing. They even said up earlier that he was going to do whatever he could protecting this little girl, but he doesn't die, which is so weird. What does this character even have left anymore? He's lost so much. The execs say that they cut his death because it would have made the audience sad, but isn't it sadder knowing that he has no family to go to back at home? Apparently not, because these meddling fools decided to cut the death out anyway. Again, the pacing continues to be a struggle even during the climax of the movie. The opening introduces the D-Rex in a pretty ominous way, but then it doesn't show up for over 1.5 hours with no explanation behind what it is or what it's doing here. The trailer did a better job setting up the D-Rex compared to the theatrical cut, and that's how most of this movie feels. A lot of Rebirth just feels inconsequential, like very little is happening. It's okay to go for a smaller scale, lower stakes adventure compared to the last trilogy, that's what I wanted. But this movie is almost too bare bones to the point where I wasn't left with much at all. No character ends up in a unique scenario, which is at least something that the last two movies had some of. The best way I've seen Rebirth described is Jurassic World on autopilot, which is a perfect summation of what it is, honestly. You won't come out hating it, hell, you might even like it, but I can't see this being anyone's favorite Jurassic movie because it doesn't leave you with anything truly memorable. Dominion, for as botched as it was, at least had an interesting premise. This movie, on the other hand, doesn't have much at all. If it at least had likable characters or a more unique tone, I could have at least called it passable. But even passable feels like too high praise for this one, I'm sorry. Even when considering its impact on the franchise, it just feels like it's doing the bare minimum. There's little to no lore connections, which is actually a really underrated part of the Jurassic movies. Even the worst ones have a lot of under-the-surface lore that gives reviewers and theorists like me a lot to chew on. This movie, on the other hand, didn't leave me with much to think about other than how little interest I have in this franchise anymore. I think the only thing that's really keeping me invested these past couple years is the games. And that's all I'm really anticipating, to be honest. This movie itself felt like a video game plot and would have worked so well in that format. Imagine an insanely high budget, never before seen Jurassic game that culminates everything great about this franchise. It could have been unforgettable. Anyways, I'm getting off topic here, and I think I've said just about everything I wanted to about Rebirth. Obviously, I'll be there for the next Jurassic movie, but my goodwill for the franchise has really declined in recent memory, and it really feels like this was Universal's final attempt at redemption. And in my eyes, they just kind of squandered it. It just hit me during the final scene of this movie. I felt a sort of emptiness that I felt at the end of Dominion and at the end of Fallen Kingdom. And this time around, I think it was the worst emptiness of them all. Recreating the iconic original ending, but with none of the substance and build-up that makes that scene perfect. It's not the same, man. It's not even close. 5 out of 10. That's enough Jurassic Park for one lifetime.